Hi, you're listening to a special segment of Hashtag Health where we focus on a particular speaker talking about a specific topic. If you would like to hear more of Dr. Fisher, or if you'd like to hear other speakers' take on porn addiction, make sure to check out the Hashtag Porn Addiction episode, or our other Hashtag Health Spotlight segments. In this Hashtag Health Spotlight, Dr. Fisher discusses if porn can cause violent behavior against women. Recently, this has become a topic of interest because of the new movie, Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile, which stars Zac Efron as a serial killer, Ted Bundy. In 1989, on the day right before he was put to death by electric chair, Ted Bundy gave his final interview, during which he explained how pornography was a driver for his homicidal behavior. During this interview, Bundy says he first discovered softcore pornography in grocery stores and was compelled to watch more and more porn in increasingly violent flavors. He said, like an addiction, you keep craving something harder, which gives you a greater sense of excitement until you reach a point where the pornography only goes so far. While he did clarify that he takes full responsibility for his actions, he does say that pornography helps mold and shape his violent behavior. He even warns that pornography and other types of violent imagery can affect children who may be a, quote, Ted Bundy who has that vulnerability. So, that's what's going on because of this new movie. But many anti-porn organizations also spread the notion that porn makes people more likely to support violence against women. They believe that this is because the vast majority of porn, violent or not, portrays men as powerful and in charge, while women are submissive and obedient.
Okay, I'm William Fisher. I'm a distinguished professor of psychology. That's the rank they gave me when I aged in place. Cross-appointed to the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology. And I've been doing research funded by the US NIH, CIHR, and SSHRC on sexual and reproductive health behavior for 4 decades. My first paper on the subject of pornography was published in 1978, and I've continued to work in that area over the years. Recently, I've published several papers on the impact or non-impact of pornography on the couple, and I've been invited to provide testimony to the Parliament of Canada concerning pornography. I've spent a substantial part of my career looking at the potential for pornography to stimulate anti-woman aggression. We clearly have an utterly unacceptable level of sexual violence and sexual coercion in society, and it didn't require Me Too to let us know that. This has been a problem across the years. And one perspective would be that exposure to violent pornography would result in violent and anti-woman sexual enactments. We've done a fair amount of research on the idea that it will be high-risk men who are misogynists, delinquents, sociopaths. That very small fragment of men may be especially affected by pornography. There's one study that suggests that's the case. Our study replicated that, but then we said, what happens if we take into account intensity of sex drive? And what we found is that highly misogynistic delinquent men, young men, with a high sex drive actually report more sexual aggression, and pornography has no role. Right now, we are conducting SSHRC-funded nationally representative research where we're testing this proposition in 1,000 young men who are students and 1,000 young men who aren't students. The best answer I can give you with respect to pornography and aggression right now is that whether we know it or not, we're all participants in a gigantic natural experiment that began in 1995. What does that mean? Beginning in about 1995, pornography of every single type became universally accessible on the internet. And I wrote a paper saying this might be a problem because unlike being trapped with the dirty magazines of the day, an individual, particularly an anti-woman individual, can create his or indeed her own sexual stimulus array that might exaggerate antisocial tendencies. Now, when you look at the quote-unquote natural experiment of 25 years plus minus unlimited accessibility to exactly the kind of pornography that you may wish to Taylor into your own bookmark list. What you see in both the United States and in Canada is a steep decline, repeat, a steep decline in victimization reported sexual coercion. And that's not police reports, which are massively underreported. What that is both in the US and in Canada, the government goes out to large samples of men and women. It's active surveillance. It says, have you experienced this in the last year? Have you experienced that in the last year? And what you see is actually a steep decline. I'm not going to argue that the availability of pornography has caused a steep decline, but I'm going to say that if there were a robust impact of pornography in elevating aggression, you might not see that. Now, it does not rule out the possibility that there's a small core of men who are affected by this that are lost in the great majority of men. But when you want to establish a policy, for example, on population-wide regulation, you look at population data. So if you want to know whether raising the cost of cigarettes reduces the number of smokers, you look at everybody. Now, a certain proportion of them may be affected in one way or the other, but overall. So we don't tend to see, either in the US or in Canada, anything but a decline in victimization, active surveillance reported sexual coercion since the inception of universal availability of pornography. For every distressing social problem, there's a simple and sovereign solution, and it's usually wrong. Okay? And in the case of pornography, it may make us feel uncomfortable. It may join with our entirely well-founded and overwhelming concern about sexual violence. And believe me, if the data supported a link between pornography and aggression, that's what my literature would show, my publications, my peer-reviewed research, my grant-supported research, my testimony before Parliament would show. But it doesn't seem to be that way. There are other factors, notably personality factors that are both delinquent, sociopathic, that is not rule-abiding, and anti-woman that do appear to be linked. And I concluded my discussion before the Parliamentary Committee on Health that was looking at this, and I said, look, we are all capable of acting directly against violence against men and women in a sexual context, both with reforms to the court system, reforms to legislation, and reforms to sex education. The fact that me and my graduate students were able to do a study of hundreds of young university students, and we were able to ask them, tell us exactly what happened, tell us exactly what was done, tell us exactly what was said during your last novel, that is, first-time sexual experience with a new partner. And the fact that not one person engaged in anything we could identify as active, verbal, clear, affirmative consent, that tells us where we got to start. These guys were not porn addicts. These guys were following what is sadly the normative script, which is a dishonest seduction script where one party doesn't want to ask the other and say something, I'm attracted to you, would you like to have sex? One party doesn't want to botch what they regard as a perfect seduction. The other person doesn't want to appear too easy. So we've got a lot of work to do. If I thought porn addiction was at the root of sexual dysfunction, aggression, relationship distortion, and brain changes, I'd say so. But there are a lot more proximate causes. The problems are real. The most effective way to address them remains a discussion that is more complex.
So if Dr. Fisher's research doesn't show a link between pornography and sexual aggression, what are some of the potential causes or risk factors? Much research has found that, especially in male college students, alcohol use is associated with sexual aggression perpetration. Another big one is a prior history of childhood sexual abuse, with one nationally representative study showing that men with a history of childhood sexual abuse were 6 times more likely to report sexual aggression against others than men without. While we can't explain the actions of infamous serial killer Ted Bundy, we do know that he was known to consume large quantities of alcohol before committing his crimes. Ted Bundy described alcohol as an essential component to his actions, and said that he needed to be extremely drunk while on the prowl in order to diminish his inhibitions and allow him to fully act on his impulses. So we can't dismiss Ted Bundy's last thoughts attributing his actions to pornography addiction. We don't know how pornography may or may not have affected him as an individual. We can say, however, that on a large scale, this isn't a trend we see being applicable to everyone who watches porn. If you want to hear more about porn addiction, go check out our page and listen to the #health porn addiction episode, featuring Dr. William Fisher as well as our other guest speakers, Dr. David Lay and Dr. Guy Grenier. If you like this #health spotlight segment, remember to subscribe to the #health podcast and follow us on social media to be alerted when we post new content.